It's too early. Nearly, wait. What's that? Why are we doing things early? We are getting up to go and get the new little stunted dwarfs because I think they actually look quite cool. I'm going to paint them. What could go wrong here? Okay, so what are my hopes for the dwarfs? They look like simple kits, which is really important to me. A lot of GW's kits recently are not my type of kit. So I'm hoping that we've got not too many pieces, easy assembly, and an enjoyable painting experience. I think they will have the enjoyable painting experience. Apart from like access issues, being can I dry brush and can I get in there, the kits should look pretty spot on, fingers crossed. Guys, has anyone ever needed an excuse to paint a massive dinosaur model? Look at that texture. And you have a human for scale. Okay, let's have a look at the instructions. Yeah, they're going to be good. We're fine. Joints that should be round and flat, wonderful. Lots of different options. An option to not have a head, great. Solid weapon options, variety in poses. I mean, yeah. All right. These models are cute. Got a couple. I think we'll go for Sword in the Airman over Atmospheric Moonwalk Dude because glowing stuff. Just drilled the barrel, nearly forgot. Let's get these primed. Let's get my texture palette primed. Unfortunately, we have had a little bit of a wrinkly prime. There's not too much I can do about that at this stage. So I'm just going to change tack and we're going to paint this guy with a little bit more heavy weathering going on. I'm going to prime him now by hand, by brush, in an effort to kind of smooth things out a little bit. So I'm going to do that. I'll probably just use Wordbearer's Red with a bit of black in it. But yeah, bit of a shame for that to happen. Smoothest butt that's ever been. The brush prime's been somewhat successful. His butt is as smooth as ever, perfect. What we're going to do is this guy's just going to be a bit more hardcore, a bit more rusty. Maybe we'll take it this far, maybe we won't, but yeah, we're going to see. So I've got Wordbearer's Red with black in it down as the base color. It's a really nice color. I'd recommend that thoroughly. What we're going to do now is go on to a bit of Scrag Brown. And essentially we're going to try and use techniques all over the model for the leather that are also a primer for us doing a kind of rusty metal. So we're going to try and get as much of the model covered as fast as possible with those. We'll of course be using our Series D dry brushes for this. There's quite a few new people who are followers to the channel. Of course we're doing painting videos. We're also a company that makes products, and the products that I'm using, this is ours. Mine's about 3 times heavier than it used to be. It's our texture palette, and I'm using our Series D dry brushes here. So for the eagle-eyed amongst you, you might notice he looks a lot more like this color than this color. I've decided to give myself a little bit more room to go up to a bright color by using more of the Wordbearer's Red. So actually the first layer is just a very, very consistent. It's not heavy in terms of the amount of paint. Let me re-demonstrate. It's heavy in terms of the amount of time that we spent making sure that we cover everything with a high quality, soft, thin layer of dry brushing of the Wordbearers. Applying it to my brush, which has been dampened slightly. That's important, keeping the paint fine, not chunky, not dry. We're not touching a paper towel, none of that business. That's the quality of dry brushing that we're aiming to get on the model. And if you check here, it's just really soft but consistent buffing all over with the Wordbearers. Now, aim of this is going to look smooth on the leather, you know, that material, whatever we're doing, but it's going to be leather colored by the end. Pretty much catching everywhere, but we're catching it in accordance to how much it sticks out. We don't want the armor to look smooth. That's not the idea. We're going to make it rusty, but as soon as we put some stippling on the armor, it'll look rougher anyway, and we're laying the same base coat, so it's pretty efficient to do it like this. What we're going to do now is just transition into using a little bit more of the scrag. See, I'm just sneaking a bit in from the side. And we're doing exactly the same, but we're going to hit less of the model, so slightly softer. I'm using a small brush here for good reason. That's because I want to be able to get into every nook and cranny. Something else that we've got going on is because we've gone from this color and we've still got a bit of this color in the brush, the quality of our dry brushing is just going to look higher. It's not actually that much higher, but the fact that we've got a transition just allows us to look a little bit softer, a little bit more subtle, and especially if we're going for leather, which we are, it's a very, very useful way to do it. Each step's pretty quick as well, so you're not adding too much time by doing it like this. We're still getting everywhere on the model. But very soon I'm going to stop caring as much about the armoured sections because we're going to be getting them with the stippling. This is why I need a small dry brush to get between his legs. If you're just going from above and you're trying to do something zenithal, it doesn't matter nearly as much. But we're not doing that. This is going to be a kind of old school paint job, just with weathering, I think. The scrag brown's a lot warmer. It's more orangey than red. Very nice kind of autumnal brown. Love those stepped armor plates, they're so good. Just asking to be weathered. They should look brilliant with metallics going on as well. Nearly there. I'm just going to do a final pass with pure scrag brown, kind of gently, and then we'll be ready for the stippling and the next steps. All over, leave no stone unturned. From above, from below. So you can see the top of this gun, I've basically completely missed with every step because I've been holding the model and going at it rather than from above it. It's worth it at this stage just to do a final pass. And luckily the technique's forgiving enough that you can kind of get away with having missed one step. Are we going to do his glowing sword blue or green though? That is the question. All right, so the next step. Now, you can use an extra small D for this, or you can use a old chubby brush. You still want to have a decent amount of control, so the most important thing is that the tip's not too wide. I'm going to use one of my old beaten up metallic M brushes. Weirdly, we're not particularly going for subtlety here. We want stuff to look like it's gone a bit wrong. Have faith, concentrate on the edges a bit, but you do want it to be noticeable. Your brush is probably going to have a profile when you're stippling, so you want to keep rotating it just to avoid stuff looking identical. You might end up with like a load of L-shaped stipples, for example. You want to avoid stuff like that. Right, we're going to get all of his armour in that manner. The nice thing is, because we've dry brushed, the edges are already going to be a bit lighter, and the areas next to them are going to be a bit darker because the dry brushing's passed over them. We're working with our model, not against it. That all over. So, got our stippling on the go. It went a little bit heavy on a couple of areas, but overall it's okay. Now, we're going to start really bringing some age to this piece. So you can use either of these two brushes for this. It's the same that we've used for the stippling. So you could use extra small D, baby, or you could use a 1 or 2M. Now, basically you just don't want something that's too long. The reason for that is metallics are strong, and the metallic we're using is particularly strong. We're trying to maintain the nice soft dry brushing that we've got in all the material sections, and we want something which we can specifically hit edges with without a worry of it overspilling onto the areas next to it. That's really important. So short, soft, high quality, either of those will do. Now the paint we're using, surprise, surprise to absolutely no one, Flow Gamer Silver, it is incredibly strong. It's also very bright. So what we're going to be doing is we're going to be adding a bit of sunblack. You can use any black, but I'm using a Baden to the mix. And then that's making us basically a, I guess you'd say it's a bolt gun equivalent. So they are very fine pigments, go on really smooth, but they are potent. There you go. Let's pick a particularly difficult area. It's just a matter of carefully making sure you're almost kind of edge highlighting against the edges, but you're just making sure that you don't overspill to the other areas. If you're too worried about it, you can just go at it and stipple. Either way is fine, but the thing that we're going to be doing mostly is just patient buffing. And what that's going to do is it's going to build up this incredibly realistic kind of rusty old metal effect. Also the texture that we got by accident on the belly, this is going to it's going to work with that, like an old shipwreck or something. So we're going to do that all over, exactly the same as the first layer of brown, just, you know, solid, consistent, not too heavy pressure, just patience. And we're going to carry on buffing those areas until they look absolutely ancient. You'll get more on the edges, that's fine, that's where it would be, and that's a core part of using a technique like this. I base coated the weapon in Monument's bright ivory, by the way, just wanted the brightest, strongest possible thing to leave room for white. So that's the paint that I've used. Okay, so I've base coated a couple of areas, not particularly important how I've done it, but they're base coated. The reason for doing this now is I want to be able to use the final silver highlight to highlight the bronzy weapon. So we just mixed word bearers and retributor for this color that we've got for the bronzy bits. I've put more of the ivory on the sword and in the area where the plasma is going to be, and on his glasses bit. Still don't quite know how I'm going to handle that. And then I've just used Incubi Darkness for kind of the elbow pads and his feet and stuff like that. I'm going to give that a little bit for dry brush with some grey added, and that'll pull the color down because currently it's a bit too saturated for how I want these bits of the model to be. Looking good though, so we're going to pop on with the slightly scary super silver drive brush. Now before I do any washing, I will be dusting this guy off. The metallics have got little flakes in them, and even though I'm specifically using an ultra fine one, they're very noticeable. So after I've done the final stage of the dry brushing with the silvers, I'll go over the model probably with this brush, and I'm basically just going to dust off the recesses. Let's check. It is very shiny. And hopefully what we can do is just get away with, there we go, lazy. Excellent. This paint is so unbelievably strong. This goes forever. Okay, yeah, so that's it. Now we do have, this is a little bit too bright at this stage. We do have one final trick up our sleeves, which is a bit of a weird one. This is credited to Juan because I had never thought of doing this before. So what we're going to do is we're going to take black, pure black. There's still a bit of silver in the brush, but it's pretty much pure black. And we're going to dry brush this over the silver. This is going to pull everything back a little bit, and it just makes stuff look so much older. You can always add more shine on top of this specifically if you want to. Hopefully you can see that on the helmet area. It really pulls it back, just instant age. It's absolutely amazing. So we're going to be taking the silver up everywhere and then pulling it back. And then I've got some sneaky stuff that we can start doing on the sword, and we'll do the details afterwards, kind of bit by bit. I'm still going to be being very careful though with getting silver in areas that we don't want it to be. Okay, so it doesn't matter what light paint you add to the Incubi Darkness. I've just added some of the ivory that was on my palette. Just don't add something that's like a light blue. We're trying to dial this down, not ramp it up. And then everywhere that I've got, I'm just going to gently buff up. Get these little cute elbow pads. And if you want, you could take it a tiny bit higher, which I will. Using a non-GW paint when you're adding to this is going to make it more matte. So if that's something you're after, go for it. I am here. I want this to look kind of old and used and a bit scratched. Now note that I'm doing this after I've done metallics. The reason for that is if I've had any overspill anywhere, I'm going to be able to cover it over just by doing painting, not by doing fixing. So the sequencing is really important with pretty much every single aspect of this model so far. We'll paint his little carabiner with a very shiny metal because any climbers out there will know that you do not want rusty carabiners. There you go, it's really looking like old leather. Oh dear, I've missed a bit. Okay, I'm going to do some fixing, then we'll do some dusting because this is fluffing stuff a little bit. By that I mean, we'll just do that all over the model. Yeah, he's beginning to take shape though, and the little steps that we're adding and making sure that all of him looks aged. So when we do have a great big glowy sword on him, he should look pretty epic. So leather time. Right, I'm using a very small brush considering that I'm doing a wash here, but it's just to try and keep it controlled where I want. And we're going for a classic, so this is from our very popular How to Paint Leather video. You can check that out. I'll pop it on screen and it'll be linked below. We're going to be mixing Nuln Oil and Seraphim Sepia. Now, instead of using the paint that people think is in the middle, being Agrax in this situation, what we want is we want Seraphim Sepia's kind of soft body, but we want a little bit of darkness in the recesses. So we're trying to get the best of both worlds by using the two paints mixed together. This, of course, is going to make the leather look shiny, and that's absolutely fine. It'll add some depth to it because it's a transparent mix that we're using. So what that's going to have the knock-on effect of doing is adding a little bit of depth and age to our leather, hopefully. Now, both these paints have changed since I used them on painting leather in the past, but they should work exactly as it used to, hopefully. Very happy to do this a couple of times if needed. There's no replacement for being able to add physical depth to stuff, and like I said, the slightly shiny finish that we're going to get is going to be great. Should just add a little bit of age to our guy, and that is the aim, obviously. I mean, look how rusty he is. He's not looking showroom fresh. Take your time, don't allow excess pooling all over. Should look fantastic, and we'll come back and see if we need to do a second coat very shortly. Things are really starting to come to shape now, so what I need to do is I need to do everything all over the model, because whatever we do with glowing or lighting effects or OSL or however you want to put it, that's going to lay it on the top of everything else. So this is going to be the last stage that we do. This is going to be the last stage that we do. I think I'll probably have this one a little bit more glowy than the little baby plasma coil. But regardless, we need all of the areas around them to be completely finished. So I'm going to do a two-step process to really elevate the sections that are metallic, which is going to be a little wash in the recesses, just of a bad and black, because I want it to stay matte, and a tiny baby highlight that you can see that I've started to do with silver on the very edges. And then we need to decide if we want to rust it up or not. I like rust, you might have noticed. Okay, so very, very simple for the wash. You could use Nuln Oil for this if you wanted. I'm just choosing not to because it's not too much more difficult to dilute it and use it like this. And like I said, I'm not particularly after the glossy finish in the recesses. You will largely counter it when you drop orange rust on top of it, but still, I just prefer to do it like this. And all I'm going to do is run it in the recesses. If you want, you can dot rivets. You can use this to highlight whatever you like. Like if you wanted, for example, you could go around the bits in the shoulder pads to separate the bits that are two different colors, go down lines to pop them out, slightly recess details like this. You could deepen, up to you what you want to do with that. Like I say, you could use Nuln Oil. You could not do it at all. And then the second step, pretty simple. I'm going to do what I call a stuttering edge highlight on this, and with that we're going to do, it's not going to be an unbroken line because it'll just look too clean. This isn't a Space Marine. He's not clean underneath. He's not clean on top. So what we're going to be doing is highlighting with little kind of like tack, tack, tack motions on the edges of our panels. I don't want it to be a series of dots, so do some lines, but just make sure you break them up intermittently at some point. Generally speaking, the bits that stick out the most would be hit the most. You know the deal by now. And of course, while we're here, if we want to, we can dot our rivets. Make sure to turn your model whatever orientation makes this the easiest. And then you'll end up making the least mistakes or no mistakes. You can see with that, we've really just pushed the recesses that are the deepest a little further back, and we've brought the highlights a little further forwards. Now, I'm going to show you two ways you can go about doing the rust. One's very quick. So for army painters, we've got some diluted scrag brown here. It's pretty wet. Let me show you on the back of my fingernail. It's very wet. You could just blob it all over. We've done the selective dark wash, and what that means that all the recesses, something bright is going to stand out in because we've just made them that little bit darker. So you could just go all over the areas you want it on. Or you can use it a little bit less dilute, get a higher proportion of paint in there. It's about that thick, and you can be more selective. You can see I've done that here. You know, I've specifically filled these grills, hit around this detail. You could have it streaking down under rivets. It's up to you, whichever one you enjoy or whichever one you have time for. If you're trying to get stuff done quickly, just pick accordingly. I'll probably do a little bit of a mixture of both, but you can do that everywhere or nowhere. Let me show you on the front, because that's kind of the specific money shot as far as the stepped armour goes. I really do like panels like this. And with that black wash in there, this is really going to stand out just so much better. There you go. So I'm going to do that with a Scrag Brown as much as I want, which is probably going to be too much. I always enjoy stuff like this too much. But yeah, it's really going to add a little layer of realism to it. And with it being so dilute, even though it's a GW paint, it should be fairly matte as well. So do that as much or as little as you want, as thick or as thin as you want, as fast or as slow as you want. And we'll come back for the next step. All right, so we're sticking with a small brush, and we're basically just going through this sequence of oranges, or brownie oranges. So we've gone from Scrag, we're now on Troll Slayer, and then we'll be jumping to Fire Dragon Bright. We've not used Fire Dragon so far. We saved it because we wanted it to jump out in the recesses. And essentially what I do is, if you're doing it the fast way, you just use a wash, but only in the recesses instead of all over. If you're doing it the slow way that I'm doing, take it, and your aim is to just drop it within the areas that you've dotted on or glazed on so far or whatever. So if you've done little rust patches, like I've got here on his shoulder, you can just dot within them. And if you've laid it around rivets or in recess sections, you can pick particular ones where you'd like it to be brightest, and you can drop it in there like that. Pretty easy. It's faster than it looks as well, and it's quite forgiving. Like, it's pretty hard to go wrong. If you're trying to simulate gravity, remember that if someone's got their arm in the air, the bit that's at the top is the bottom. Stuff like that, it's easily done. Like, I want my rust towards the bottom of stuff, so it's going to be on this bit of the shoulder pad, not this bit. And for this arm, that's the outside. It's not the top and the bottom. Okay, our guy's looking pretty good. It is time to start approaching the scary stuff. So we're going to do some glowing effects on the little coil of his plasma rifle, and then we're going to give him a kind of, I don't know, lava sword, power weapon of some type. This shape, the way it fills up the space, like the little short stubby ones look particularly good as kind of lava swords or stuff like that, and the longer ones, maybe a less natural looking glow. I know a lava sword's not very natural, but hopefully you get what I mean there. Long and thin, I think cool sci-fi fades from one color to another work really well. Shorter and fatter, I think you can get away with a little bit more of like an organic, rapidly cooling, like something that's been pulled from a forge. So that's what we're going to go for with that. But first of all, we're going to do is coil. We'll take a similar approach to both of them, and basically that's going to be using light paints, maybe fluorescent paints, and white underpainting to help stuff look particularly glowy. We want stuff white or very close to white next to the source. That's going to be the bottom of the plasma coils. It'll be the inside of the sword, and then we'll get darker as we go out. So I've got a couple of colors here. Trying to stick mainly with GW for people, but I will probably pull in some non-GW. So I'm going to go from Cabalite. So we've got a little bit of a nuance from like a greeny blue to a greeny green. That's a little bit yellowy. The Cabalite is going to be our one that we start off with around the edges. So I'm not going to need much of this at all. Now I tend to use colors like Cabalite or Scale 75s, you know, slightly oily blues or stuff like this for this type of task, because I don't need something too strong, but you do want something that's got a little bit of depth to it. I'm going to pick up a very little amount, and essentially around the edge we're just going to start buffing this in. If it won't buff in because of the size of it, this is quite a small weapon, you can always move to glazing. I think we're going to be okay. Maybe just a little bit of patience needed. So I'm not looking to cover like a massive area around it at all by any means. And we don't want to completely obscure the color of the stuff that's below it, especially towards the edges of the glow. Okay, do one more stage of that. Hopefully it's showing up okay on camera. Now, I'm going to have to start using a white. I'm not yet going to use a crazy strong white, so we won't be pulling out the bold titanium white yet. What's that? I'm not using foundation white. Okay, just use any standard white. I was looking for normal Vallejo white. I don't know where I've put it. Take a tiny bit of this. Now, the idea for this one is this is going to go underneath our next color. So from the inside to the outside, we're just laying some pre-highlighting. You can get away with a bit more than that. You do not want your dry brush saturated at this point. You could just carefully paint this, but I quite like the fade that you get naturally from the dry brush. If you're more comfortable with just edging it, that's absolutely fine though. And then maybe it is time to put a little bit of this on the palette just in case. It's so strong, it's ridiculous. Absolute superstar when you need it. Should not be used when you don't need it because it is potent. Okay, so we've got a little bit of like a aura or a glow to it. Wash the brush, go back and take some more. Time to grab some white and paint in those recesses. So I'm going to put this just towards the bottom of the plasma coils. Paint takes a really long time to dry in areas like this, by the way, because it's so sheltered, it doesn't get airflow to it. So be patient. I'm actually just going to put it everywhere. I'm washing it around the coils themselves. It won't land on the raised areas. Okay, let that dry. Okay, so we've got a little bit of fluorescent green. That's from Vallejo. On the palette, you can add in a little bit of anything that's quite bright. Essentially, we're just trying to bring this up. We don't want to turn it too green. I know it's called Cabalite green. It's quite a bluey green though. So what we're going to do is grab a bit of the Cabalite. Take a little bit of the fluoro, pop it in there. Not too much, just a little. And we're also going to mix a little bit of the white in. And what we can do is we can just push it up into the areas that we want to be a little bit brighter. The fluoro is quite transparent. And we can also use this as actively as a glaze on the surrounding areas if you wish to. Make sure you don't have too much on the brush. And that'll just pull up the color spectrum. I only want the bottom of the coils to be white, so the actual bottom bit of the gun. I'll get with that. Then that will suggest that we've got glowing rings at the bottom of it. You can fiddle with that as much as you like, and you know, if you want to take it, I just took it with dry brushing onto the thumbs and fingers. If you want to do stuff like that, or even have it reflecting as far as the face, you absolutely could as well. Okay, now glowy swords. We're going to do his glowing sword first, and then we'll work out the OSL after that. Slightly scary, the OSL for the sword, because we're going to have it being pretty bright. Starting off with a really, really bright yellow, we've got flash skids here. You could use Uriel though, or another brand if you want. You could even mix a bit of a fluoro in if you wished. What's important though is that it's going over white. That's pretty much all that matters at this stage. So the idea is that it's going to be lighter on the inside and dark on the outside. We don't have much room for that, which may seem scary, but it's actually quite forgiving. So first steps first, we're just going to get a base coat down. Now, if this was not a tiny stubby dwarven sword, it would probably get darker towards the end. We don't really have room for that too much. We will try and make it a little bit lighter at the base than it is at the tip. So for our next step, I've got a bit of Wild Rider on the palette. Get some of the Evil Suns ready. We want to make a nice, warm, fiery orange here. I'll go with the Evil Suns. Now I'm going to glaze this, and then we're going to move on to a little bit of stippling. So what we want to do is remove a lot of it off the brush. It should be very, very dilute, very watery. And we're going to start in the middle, and we're going to end towards the outside. That needs to be diluted about 500 more times than it is, and probably have more yellow in it. Don't worry, we'll be all right. Now, this definitely doesn't have to be perfect or uniform. In fact, we're going to be stippling soon, so nothing's going to be uniform whatsoever. That's more how we wanted it. This is probably going to end up looking better at the back than it does at the front. It's always the way. It's a matter of just repeating until we've got things a lot more warm and orange towards the edge. You can do this as slow or as fast as you want. Either way, it's going to work quite well. And the moment that we've got our little stipples on, any bits of it that look like slips or whatever are not going to matter at all. The biggest thing you want to avoid is having a great big fat line that is obviously painted on. If you've got a kind of rough approximation of what you're going for, even if it's that extreme, things are probably just going to be fine. Okay, so I'm going to do a little few more layers of glazing just to push towards the edge of that, and then we can start with the stippling. Make sure to get the very edges of the sword as well. These fat ones have got an entire profile that it's quite easy to miss if you're just going front and back. Okay, time for stippling. Now we definitely have remembered to clean this brush and remove that cable out. Okay, now having definitely remembered to do that, we're going to be doing slightly wetter stippling than normal, and the reason for that is that we just want our paint to be a bit more dilute. So this isn't normally how we do stippling on the channel, but in this situation, I mean, you could actually just use a wash or something if you wanted to, but we're just trying to use more dilute paint. And we do not want a uniform pattern. So this is what I was saying, you do not need to worry about the previous steps not being perfect, because this is going to obfuscate. I cannot speak today, you might have noticed that anyway. It's hiding them. Okay, so this Evil Sun Scarlet is basically the most important colour on the blade. It's very important that we have some of it showing at the end. So while this can obscure the stuff below it, you want to take quite a lot of care just to not completely obscure it with your following stages. As a result, I'm going to take a little bit of time with this step. Okay, so as you can see, this footage is being sped up here. That is because, as regularly shows, and we don't tend to hide too much, I made a mistake here. I was covering up too much of my blade, and it didn't work out okay, so we're about to commence painting the back of the blade. Good news is, the next method is faster and better, which is great. Okay, so as happens quite frequently in our videos, I have made a failure. I'm not particularly happy with how that's come out, so luckily we've got the back that I hadn't finished. Now, to avoid making the same mistakes that I did, dramatically decrease the amount of the blade that you're covering as you go through the different stages. So we've got one here where we've just about started transitioning into the very important Evil Sun Scarlet. This happens so much. So yeah, let's pretend that we didn't make really big mistakes, and let's continue. So we've got our Evil Sun Scarlet. Gonna dilute it a lot. What I think will be great about this is actually, we're just going to transition through the colours way faster than we did on our first attempt. So having got a bit of that down, we'll quickly go to pure Mephiston Red. Mephiston Red's actually got quite a bit of black in it, which is useful for this. And at this stage, we're just doing the lightest dry brushing that you can imagine. So we're aiming to hit pretty much just the edges of the blade. Just a little. Really quickly transitioning it into a Baden Black, which luckily is very weak by black standards. Going for what feels like a 50-50 mix. Softly. Oh, that looks good. Guys, this is why we don't despair, and this is why we start again. I'm pure about him. Now it's really important that we remove a lot of this. I'm going to go soft at the start, and I'll start at the end, which is where it should be the darkest anyway. Now hopefully it should pretty much pick out exactly the same areas that the last dry brush did. I love blacky red. There we go, one lava blade. So I think actually I could have maybe even got away with just going pretty much straight to this. So in the future, just don't doubt yourself. Go real quick, and I'm going to go and repaint the front of the blade. Oh well. Okay, so what we've done at this step is we've lost a piece of footage, but we've taken the darkest colours from the rest of the model and we've dry brushed them on the side of the miniature where we think the light would be hitting it from. So you've got the blue coming from the left, you've got the red coming from the right, and the only thing that we've done is we've not included the black. So we've gone from Mephiston red to Evil Sons to Wild Rider, and each of them is more present the closer they are to the blade. Time to start painting his goggles. We've gone for something pretty simple here, so I'm just going black and white, and then over the top of that I'm going to glaze either the blue or the orangey red, depending on which side it's on. Taking a little bit of license here, I don't think the red would be reaching it, but it felt like a cool effect to give a go anyway. Doing most of this with glazing, just using a 00. You can spend as much or as little time on this as you want. The other way to approach it would just be layer down a metallic over it, give it a little wash and put 2 little dots on there, and then you could dry brush the colours over it and they probably pop through quite nicely like they have on the rest of the model. So this guy has tiny, tiny glasses. So you're going to see me gently pushing paint up towards the edges I want lighter, and then pushing darker paint towards the bits that I want darker. What you've got to bear in mind here is the point that you lift your brush off is the opposite to using a pencil. So where you lift your brush, that's going to leave the most paint, which is the exact opposite of a pencil. So lift off at the point you want the most paint to be left, which would be the lightest on the light bits and the darkest on the dark bits. I'm not airbrushing here, I'm drying it out. So you can see me sped up. Just play around until you're happy. It's quite a small one, it's quite a delicate piece. So yeah, now we've got the goggles to a stage that we're kind of happy with. They're tiny, I wasn't fully satisfied with them, but we're just gonna pop some very, very diluted glazes over them. We've got a little bit of white on there, so whatever we put on should be picked up quite easily. I'm not aiming to hide the white entirely, because that would be where it'd be reflecting the most. But a very, very thin down glaze is all we need just to pop it over. We're using Mephiston here, so thin it down tons, absolutely tons. It's quite a strong paint and it's not particularly forgiving. So yeah, you're gonna need to really, really thin it down a lot. You can go over it 3 or 4 times. That's much better than going over it once and basically painting it completely red in one go. Gently does it. Too little is a lot better than too much. You can see we've got a hint, even though that basically looked like slightly red water there. There you go, your little lift off point. He's ready for his rave. You can see really clearly the bit where I end my stroke is by far the darkest. That's exactly what I was talking about. Use a good brush for this. Not a multi-purpose one, you want to be using your absolute Sunday best. I'm using a 00, that's perfect for me. All right, we are done. Apologies for the bit of footage that we missed and the audio issues on that one. I'm just going to quickly recap the OSL method, which is the object source lighting. So not painting the thing itself, we've covered that, but the light that comes off it. So it's very, very simple. If you've added black for the darker stage of your miniature, skip that out, but pick the darkest paint, which should be the furthest away from the light source. For us, it was Mephiston Red, for example. And look from the perspective of the weapon or the blade or whatever it is. Where can that see? Where can the light from it reach? Further away is the darkest color, dry brush that, and as you get closer, just add a lighter color. Edges, which would be hit naturally with dry brushing anyway, they might have a glint on them, so maybe jump up a step for them. But it's much more forgiving than you think. Don't worry, I know it's hard, I did it on the blade. The time I went faster, I did it better and I had more fun. And I think I could have gone even faster still. So yeah, just chill out. Don't spend longer than you need to. Story of my life on that miniature. And I will be applying all the stuff that I've learned from that one to this one that we're going to go for a bit more of a simple aesthetic on. He looks doomy a hell. Great. Look at that. I love the pose of these. I wish they're about 30% bigger, but they're really lovely models to paint, just a little bit small. And I'm out of practice with fiddly stuff. That's it. If you're not subscribed, please consider subscribing. And whether you are subscribed or not, pop some suggestions down below for what you would like to see covered next, like on this model, on more Votann models, a particular technique. Is there something you're unsure of? We do read and reply to each and every comment, so if there is something that's overwhelmingly being requested, then we will take that on board and it will probably make its way into being a tutorial on the channel at some point soon. Our Kickstarter for our cabinets is still running. They're gorgeous, they're amazing. Any questions about those, please do feel free to ask them below. And that's it. I'll check you in the next video. Thank you very much for watching. See you soon.